Right. How's everyone doing? Right. Okay. Stream's up and going. Our oh, excuse me. Our bit rate seems to be good. I'll give everyone just a minute or two to join in. Get ready. Got a lot of news to cover. So I know we missed the news last week because I was traveling. So we'll have a few rapid fire sessions, or a few rapid fire topics where I'm just going to let you know that it existed as a topic. Last week I was traveling, so we missed the news last week. So there's a little bit of catch up. I got rid of most of the things that I had accumulated for the news last week, but I did save a few that I thought were important. Weren't I chatting last week? Yeah, that's what I was traveling, so that I did the database day. So I didn't do the news last Friday. That was my whole point. I didn't do the news last Friday. I think you're just confusing me now. I think you knew what I meant. All right. We can go ahead and get started. Yeah, let's go ahead and get started. Let's go ahead. All right. So we have a lot of things to discuss. Some of them are about AI. So we're actually going to do the AI section right after security. And then we'll get into open source. There was a lot of different things that I think are going to affect open source. So some interesting things that the commercial landscape is going to affect in open source. And then we'll get into the clouds, the major clouds, and then just some general things that I saw going on. Yeah. Wow, so Clutch, good to see you. Good to see you. All right, so let's jump into security. Thanks everybody for joining me on the Null News every Friday at high noon, lunch for me. We just spend an hour and a half going over the news, seeing what we can see, understanding the current ebbs and flow of the tech and software industry. Let's jump into it. We're going to start off with security. And as I've always said, please bring your own things. So if you have something that came up that you saw, maybe I missed it, and you can share it with the community. So we're starting off with security. Pathfinder is the sister to the notorious Spectre. This is a branch execution attack on Intel CPUs. As far as I understood reading through this, it does not affect AMD CPU, so I'm safe. The Null cloud is not safe. Our cloud is not safe, but this CPU is safe. So this is again another branch prediction attack that basically exploits the branch protection to leak your private and secret keys through encryption. So anyways, I'm gonna post this in the chat for everyone. Yeah, more nightmare news for you as a system admin. Yeah, so good luck. Have fun with this one. Most of the times, I was working for SUSE, and I was working for SUSE during the Spectre and Meltdown, and a lot of the times these are actually dealt with at the Linux level, either the kernel level, or your distribution is going to include a patch in whatever kernel they're shipping. So in the end, it's probably going to slow your machines down. So if I don't remember the exact stats of Spectre and Meltdown, but it was a noticeable amount, which means more than 5%. So most likely the patch that's going to come in quickly is going to do something. So if you're running your own data center, you can expect to need, a little bit more machine. Good luck, have fun. So anyways, that's probably the biggest thing that's going to come out. You're going to patch. If you're already close to being at max of your provision, you're probably going to need to provision some more machines. It depends on how much, how big of a data center you have and everything, but that's the biggest thing. The other big thing in security is that there are millions of Docker repos found with phishing malware. So it turns out that a lot of containers deployed out there actually are suspected of malicious or unwanted content. Now, it seems that Docker is working very hard to remove these, but finding and targeting and removing them is a thing of its own. But this is why getting a signed container from a company that you're wanting to get the container from is such a big deal. This is why it's such a big deal. This is why we have started here at Null Labs. We've started signing every single publicly available container. It's such a big deal. It is. So I say we've started signing every container that we make, and that's like every container moving forward. So anyways, that was it. The big things for security that I saw that are going to affect, Pathfinder is going to affect people patching and your system admins, and this is really just understanding which Docker containers you use and making sure that you're getting them from a reputable source. You can't. This is just like PyPy or npm. You can't just pull a thing without knowing who maintains it and what their security stance is. That's the world we live in. You can't do it. Signed containers is awesome. You know what? I need to make a video on just it. So we did it in this last, we did it a couple weeks ago with Adrian, but we did a bunch of stuff with Adrian. And what I want to do is I want to do like an actual recorded bit where we go through and sign our containers. So let's put that on our docket for this upcoming week, doing a little recorded session. Throwing that in really quickly. You know what we really need to do then also is update it to require our Kubernetes cluster to only allow signed containers. I don't know if the CNCF signs all their containers. I hope so. That would be an interesting, we'll look into that part. We'll look into the second part of that, but all right, documented. Okay. Anything else for security? And happy Friday. It's a good Friday. You know what? There's a high chance I stream tonight, this evening, because the 2 Saturdays ago, our Learning Rust detoured from what I had originally written in a good way. But I need to update what we had written. So I'm probably going to be working on that tonight. It's a really good Friday to have an AMD CPU. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So we're going to jump into AI news. There's a bunch of stuff jumping around on the AI news, and we're gonna talk about that before we talk about open source. Yeah. The first thing is I want to bring our attention to Microsoft says, I'm sorry, Microsoft. Microsoft says most company execs won't hire anyone without AI aptitude, prompting a 142 times increase in LinkedIn members adding AI skills like Copilot and ChatGPT to their profiles. Now, the really weird thing here to me that doesn't make sense about this, the really weird thing here is that if Copilot is doing its job correctly, you don't need to have skills in it. If ChatGPT is doing its job correctly, you don't need to have skills in ChatGPT. So this is actually a really weird statement to me. Now, that being said, we run the AI games here, and I think it's about time for us to have the summer games. Lots have changed, and there's been a lot of things from Llama and other things that have come out. So there's a lot of things that have changed. So I think we're going to have to, maybe towards the end of July, plan on a summer AI games, where we battle these out and see. But the other thing that I'm going to be releasing along with these summer AI games is I'm going to release my how to leverage Copilot and ChatGPT as a software engineer, because we have been learning how to do it here. And the fact of the matter is that there is actually skill required to leverage these two things, because they don't do their job well. And so if you're going to be efficient at it and leverage them well, I do think that there are some things and some steps and some methodology that you have to use to actually engineer prompts that do better than other prompts. Apollo, we will be running our own ML. I actually joined some of the streams because we actually, right now, we use a hosted machine learning model for our Twitch alerts. And one of the things we'd love to do is actually run that locally. So we probably will. The problem is, like, it just is expensive to run for just. And the problem I have is it has to be running all the time, because if somebody follows when we aren't streaming, it still needs to, and sometimes that actually does happen. The alert needs to be generated so it can be saved in the database. So it has to be running 24/7, but it's not used very much and it could be expensive. The thing that I thought we might do is run a fallback. So it tries to generate it with the local one, and if the local one's not accessible, it falls back to ChatGPT. We might do something like that so that we can just run it when we're streaming and stuff like that. Yeah. Anyways, let's move on. We will be running our own local one, at least a little. We're going to try it on a Raspberry Pi. All right. Something that scares me is I read this from TechSpot. Computer science coding classes de-emphasize syntax as professors teach high-level skills in AI era. Now, there are two trains of thoughts on what a school should do, whether it should teach you the hypothetical or should it teach you how to get a job. Right now, I don't think that schools do either very well. I don't think that they focus on how to teaching you useful stuff for a job, and I don't think that they really teach the hypothetical super well. Now, what I would have to say is you as an engineer have to show your value. And so, if in the age of AI, where we have these really advanced statistical analysis machines, you have to be better than statistical analysis. That's just where we're going. And this means, to me, a better understanding of the low level is maybe a really good thing. So this kind of scares me, because if we're teaching our children how to prompt AI, well, that's kind of the easy thing to learn. I'll be releasing a class on it, on how to prompt engineer. I'm not the best, but I'm definitely also not the worst. All right. OpenAI CEO Sam Altman promises with a high degree of scientific certainty that ChatGPT 5 will be smarter than ChatGPT 4. Now, that being said, every release of ChatGPT, Sam Altman has said that they're a little bit scared. This was with ChatGPT 4. This one was with ChatGPT 5 or with ChatGPT 3. Every single release, he says the same thing, that he's a little scared. So I take this with a grain of salt when you see this, because this has been going on since 2020 with the releases of each one of them. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. All right. Big news, Amazon Code Whisper is now called Q Developer and is expanding its functionality. Now, this makes me a little sad because Amazon Q was dumpster tier garbage. It was worse than Code Whisper. Code Whisper was maybe an acceptable choice, but Q was terrible. Now, we'll cover more of this in the cloud section because they actually have a little bit more on it. I just wanted to bring it up here that has been renamed. So in the summer games, we'll be testing Q Developer. We'll see if it's better, like they promise. Let me one moment and then I'll catch up on Jack. Okay. GitHub Copilot workspaces. I have a little bit about this we're going to record in the future on one of my random streams. But GitHub Copilot workspaces is basically the cloud computing environment nobody asked for that allows you to use Copilot just for your project. So we will be testing this out ourselves. It's in technical preview. But basically, GitHub Copilot workspaces is not that hard to say, but it is giving me a little tongue-tied here. Is basically just that those code workspaces with GitHub Copilot built into it. Now, supposedly this gives you really good project level recommendations, which Copilot has always been really good about. If you open up a folder, it basically searches that folder to give you recommendations from previously written code. So I can imagine that it would be really good at that. But what we really need to test, and what we'll test in the summer games if I get access to it, is it better than Copilot without code working spaces? I don't really know. So we'll see. We'll see if we'll see if it does any better. We'll see if it does any better. But that was released. Supposedly, you can go to full working software in production with just natural language. We'll see. I find it funny because they make that claim and then they'll make a claim of like 40% acceptance, and it's like, okay, so maybe not. But that was all for AI. Did you guys see anything else in AI? All right. I'm literally dealing with this story at my university this semester. My OOP class is making us use ChatGPT to teach us OOP topics with goofy tones. Explanation. Seems like a wasted use of ChatGPT, but it's weird that they are making us use it. That is very weird. I agree. Very weird. And the worst thing is, I go back and forth on this. I think that ChatGPT is a fantastic learning tool for experienced developers. And that's a very specific thing. You'll be like, oh, well, experience. We all have stuff to learn. But experienced developers actually, like, I can sniff out when it's hallucinating. I can be like, that doesn't sound right, you know? And then when it does sound right, I still then go validate it. I use it as a way to explore and validate. But this is going to be in my complete class that I released just before the summer games, the AI summer games. So that will be released on YouTube. It's going to be fun, but also hopefully informative. So my thing is, as a junior or as a person just learning, I don't think it's very good, because if you don't understand how to sift through what it gives you, it can be very dangerous. You can learn stuff that you don't want to learn, or is it correct? And I know that they try with ragging and it's gotten better, but it still hallucinates stuff. All right. So let's talk open source. Let's talk open source. There's actually a lot of stuff. We're not going to be able to touch on all of it. Some of this is going to be rapid fire. So yeah, let's start. Here we go. Red Hat Summit was okay. Yeah. You guys are getting me on this, but yes, it is easy to feel reliant on it as a beginner too, which is hard. And like if you're using it to not understand what you're doing, that's the worst. What you should be teaching people is to understand the base concepts so that they can leverage an AI to go faster. So this seems completely backwards to me if I was teaching, because the idea would be to leverage these tools to do more than I was capable of doing. But that doesn't mean that I shouldn't know the base concepts, shouldn't know that good foundation so that I can write good software leveraging the AI. This is should be the goals of the universities, but like I said, don't get me started on this. This is a whole, maybe I can make a video out of this, but it kind of saddens me to see this as a thing going forward. All right, let's talk open source. I don't have the time to go on the full rant of, and again, there are two theories of thought of what a university should do, what a college should do. If we're talking about that really quickly, the two schools of thoughts are basically this. One school of thought is that schools should be teaching you theory. So they should be teaching you computer science theory. They should be making people that are ready to basically, people that go to college should, in this line of thought, should all go get their PhD, in theory, because they're made to think about computers at the theoretical level. Then the other school of thought is that universities should teach you to work a job. Now, I find that they do neither of these well. They like, in my personal and professional experience, they don't do either of these well. Most of the people coming out of the university are not well equipped to work a job. And I would also say that most of them coming out of it are not actually well versed to get their PhD either. And to really push the levels of theory in, when you get your bachelor degree in computer science, are you really going to do any research or anything like that? No. So if you're not doing research, you probably want it to help you get a job, but it doesn't really work that way. So anyways, unfortunately, this is kind of the state I see it as, is they just do neither school of thought very well. And that's a problem. Now, which one they should do? Personally, I think that if you don't get your PhD, it should teach you to get a job and be more like a, skilled labor. And then if you go the other way, that should be your PhD where you're doing those. So that's kind of how I see it. They should do both. One's 4 years, one's 8 years. But again, they kind of do neither. Hi, see Boxy. How are you doing? All right, let's get back to the news because that's what we're here to talk about. Now, over the last week and a half, it was last week, I think it was. Last week, there was the Red Hat Summit. Now, I tried to watch some of the stuff going on at the Red Hat Summit for you all, but I didn't see all of it. So if I missed something, remember, let us know. But one thing that I saw that was interesting during this Red Hat Summit was a new Red Hat container that's being released. Now, as we all have talked, containers are this light middleware where they don't run a kernel, they don't run any of that type of stuff. They're very light. They just contain a process. That's kind of what they're supposed to be. Well, Red Hat said, hold up. What if we flip this paradigm on its head and said, instead of being a lightweight container, we pack a kernel, we pack everything that's in a Red Hat distribution into the Red Hat image. And they're like, yeah, let's do it. It sounds like a good idea. And that's what they did and released in the Red Hat Summit. Now, maybe this is brilliant beyond my comprehension, but to me, this seems like a micro VM thing. This seems like a VM thing, and I don't understand it. So I'm asking you guys to help me understand it. It seemed like the craziest thing to come out of there, these fat images with everything in it, so that you can treat your container like a VM, but it's not a VM and it doesn't have the isolation of a VM either. So again, that was the most confusing thing. Other than that, there wasn't a whole lot of really, I didn't see anything that was like groundbreaking. There was, kind of some of the standard stuff. So, anyways, that was the VM acquisition was a long time ago. VMware acquisition was a long time ago. But yes, we did. We covered it. The VMware acquisition has been in the works and has been a disaster for a long time. Long time. All right. Google has been laying off some people. And this affected two groups specifically, the Python and the Flutter team. And this actually has a really big implication for open source. And this is kind of the open source that's the supported by the industry. A lot of the Python, the main maintainers of Python worked at Google. And I say worked because they don't anymore. The same with Flutter. Flutter is an open source project that, for one, Ubuntu has been using. Now, they haven't put it in the graveyard yet, but they did let go of the development team for Flutter. So my assumption is that since this was mostly a corporate-backed project, that it's going to go that way. And this, this has huge implications for corporate-backed open source. Some of the most, what I would consider stable open source. And the same goes with Python. Google lays off the majority of their Python developers that were the core maintainers of Python. As much as I would love to see Python go the way of the dodo and just cease to exist, there is so much that goes on in Python. So I think, honestly, this has huge implications. I know that this is in open source, and we're talking about open source because I think it has huge implications of open source. A lot of these... a lot of these open source projects are maintained by people getting paid at these large companies. And if these large companies say, hey, we're not going to pay developers to actually maintain these projects, that is bigger than like the funding. Because a lot of people will be like, oh, open source projects aren't funded and whatnot. But a lot of the times, especially these, are funded by the fact that they hire the engineers that maintain them. This has huge implications and massive implications for Google itself. So yeah, I don't know more to say on that. I think that we're gonna have to keep watching that because I think that it has pretty implications. Implications. But like I said, we'll have to see where it goes. I can't predict it in the future. Yeah. The Google graveyard does have quite a few. You know what? We have an ad coming up. So before we get into anything else, I'll go ahead and let the ad run before we get into more open source news, because we have some more open source news. Yeah, like I said, it has big implications because Google is such a supporter of open source news. If they take this approach, it could really hurt their open source stance a lot. Nighthound, how are you doing? How are you doing? Yeah, we are in ads right now. Paula, we did actually talk about that a couple weeks ago. I know not everybody gets ads, but some people do get ads. So I like to pause just in case there's a couple people. This is the news. I don't want them to miss anything. They do miss getting to chat for a little bit. So if you're a subscriber or whatnot that doesn't get ads, or if you're like Nighthound who lives in a country that doesn't get ads, awesome. But it is the news, so I do pause. But QRDX, push QRDX, you're absolutely right. Not everybody gets ads at the same time. I do try to do it so that I try to do it so that people don't get pre-run ads, as well as I run as few ads as possible. So yeah, I run as few ads as possible. 3 per hour, 3 minutes per hour. That's what they forced me to do. That's what you guys get. All right, we have 40 seconds left. Sweet. We're about halfway through open source. Then we have cloud, and then we have just a little bit of general that's coming out. The general stuff is stuff I found interesting, but I don't know that we'll talk about it very long. We'll see how much time we have left. All right, so everyone's back. Welcome back after that ad break. Thanks for sticking around. Let's get back into open source. This could have been in the machine learning, and is something that we're going to have to test on our AI games. So AI games probably going to be end of July. We're going to run the AI games again, and IBM is open sourcing their Granite code models. So this is one we're going to have to test. The cool thing is, hopefully we're going to be able to run the Granite code models locally, which would be really cool. So if even if not, we'll run the Granite code models somewhere else. They have a bunch of statistics, but as I've said, as we've seen across the years of running the AI games, these stats mean very little about how useful they are to actually coding. They mean very little. So be careful when you look at pretty stats and be like, oh, it's better than ChatGPT. I will tell you, it is, all these stats look really good. It puts it looking really good. But as you have learned last week in our benchmarking thing, benchmarks are kind of subjective, and it can be very difficult to truly benchmark something. So anyways, I'm excited about this. Well, I've already put it on the list as one of the contestants, if I can make it work, to test in the summer AI games. Merrick, have you considered running your own models locally? And the answer is yes, I would like to, if we can run it efficiently enough or in such a way that we have a fallback, because my Twitch alerts run all the time, and they have to, because if somebody follows or does something at an off time, I still want to keep their story in the database. We will be running some, like I said, about halfway through the year, we're going to be switching over to learning some AI stuff, which is going to be running some of our own models locally, but also training some of our own models. So it'll be fun. It'll be fun. Let's keep going. Microsoft's 1 million vote of confidence in the Rust's future. Now, this was more a $1 million vote in the Rust Federation, which is poorly placed. But I'm happy to see continued support for Rust. I'm happy to see companies like Microsoft continue to support it. So I'm happy to see that. As much as I dislike the Rust Federation. All right. What we all needed was another new programming language. It seems like they're coming out of the woodwork as fast as Node NPM modules are. But this one, I actually think, is an interesting take, because it's a take that people aren't talking about. So in the world of statistical analysis, Finch is what they're calling, which is a terrible name, but it supports both flexible flow control and diverse data structures. So a lot of the linear algebra data structures that are used, like sparse arrays and things like that, aren't necessarily supported well in flexible flow control programming languages to date. And so it's looking to combine both of those. I think it's interesting. I'm not necessarily thinking that this is the next new language or anything like that. I think it's an interesting take, and I'm one of the things that I think happens a lot of the times with these is something like this will happen, and that feature will be really cool. And other languages will adopt it. We have seen this over and over and over again, whether it's with Java or whatnot. Think about the new features Java supports now that it didn't, based off of new languages coming out and being like, hey, look at this, we can do Lambda functions. And then it's like, okay, well, Java now has, anonymous functions. Cool. So does C++. That came out in a language. I don't know which language came out with. It was probably a functional language. And other languages adopted it because it was a good feature. So I'm looking forward to the features that come out of this and maybe how it affects other languages going forward. All right, this is something that I saw which is just an observability tool. So we can go to GitHub and look at it. It's co-root. Co-root is a collecting metrics, logs, and traces alone doesn't make your application observable. Turns this data into actionable insights for you. So it's basically, I saw it. I wanted to throw it out there. It's open source. The Apache 2 license. It's an interesting project. Haven't tried it. Don't know how well it works. Don't know how well it lives up to it. But yes. Definitely worth looking at. Sorry, I know I'm rapid firing some of these. Like I said, we basically have 2 weeks of news to cover, so we're going for it. Introducing Ceph Squid, the future of storage today. I love statements like this. The future of storage today. There needs to be a comma. The future of storage today, exclamation point. Reinforced by the strongest alliance yet. Now, there was a whole Ceph thing with the CNCF So storage tomorrow. Yeah. The Ceph Foundation, the global community dedicated to fostering the growth and advancement of Ceph, is excited to announce the upcoming release of Ceph Squid, which comes from several performance and space efficiencies featuring along with. So, anyways, if you're a Ceph user, there has been a lot of enhancements done to Ceph with this. So I'm excited about it. Ceph is something you need your PhD to run, but if you have your PhD and can run it, it's actually pretty amazing. So anyways, I am excited about it. Proton. For all of you Linux gaming out there, I know we got my Arch Linux set up for gaming. Proton 9.0 is out. Proton 9.1 is out. Previously playable with Proton Experimental. So basically, now you don't have the experimental. Bloody Walls is available. I know that's out of all of this list. What I have no idea what that is, but it's out, making things a whole lot better. So there's a whole bunch of fixes to this. So for Linux gaming, Proton 9.0 is out. It's fantastic. I don't know. I haven't used it, but I'm excited. We'll probably update to it at some point. Proton is underappreciated. You know what? I need to do some game streams just because I've switched to gaming on Linux and it's awesome. And it's just worked for the most part, even on Arch. So, like, we should do some just to celebrate the fact that I can game on this PC that I code on. Fantastic. Okay. The other thing, which we're not going to get the time to go over, if people would like the time, leave me a comment that they would like to go over this. The CNCF will release their annual survey, and something that caught my eye was this. Have you or your organization ever deployed an application using WebAssembly? And the answer is these are the Americas, Europe, and Pacific. 53% said no in the US and Europe. And then Asia Pacific, they seem to be more adopting. But then if you actually go into it, there's some of that is like personally, and then organization, these numbers don't all add up to 100%. They don't all add up because I think a lot of them are in the don't know or not sure. And I'm guessing those are no's as well. So really, we're looking at more like 75% are saying no. The other 5% are saying yes personally, which would be me. I would say no, my organization is not, but yes, personally, I have, because we have Twitch alerts is a WebAssembly. And I'm guessing the last like 5% here is this both myself and my organization have used WebAssembly. Now, they kind of try to go into seeing what is holding back people from leveraging WebAssembly. What do you guys think is what holding people back? I have my own ideas of what is holding people back from leveraging WebAssembly, but I'd love to hear your guys' ideas. Yeah, how they represented this data is really it doesn't read very well. I had to take a double take on it to actually feel like I understood, but it took a little while. Basically, 95% of people say, organizationally speaking, they do not use WebAssembly. Now, if you have to go into the full thing, not their pretty pictures here, to go into some of their thoughts on why, or some of the data they collected on why people haven't done it. But yeah, anyways, I thought it was interesting, especially because WebAssembly gets a lot of hype. I just haven't seen it actually leveraged a whole lot. All right, moving on to the cloud. If I had to guess, I'd say the web is already performing enough for their solution. I don't think WebAssembly is truly about the performance over JavaScript. Although I do think that you get better performance than JavaScript, I don't think that that is the reason people would adopt it. At least not the reasons I've seen people hype it. All right, let's jump into the cloud. Let's jump into the cloud. But again, I could be wrong. To me, WebAssembly is yet another Java virtual machine. So if you adopt yet another Java virtual machine, JVM, if you're adopting that, you're looking for the ability to leverage multiple languages. The problem with JVM and the problem with the Java virtual machine, is that you have this Java virtual machine. You have basically transpiling on all of your languages that can just compile for whatever you're running on. So one of the things will be like, they'll be like, well, with the Java virtual machine, my code runs on anything. Well, with Rust or Go, my pipelines can compile it for anything as well. So it runs on anything that I want it to. And most of us are targeting specific architecture in the cloud anyways. And so we just compile it for that. And all these modern languages compile to things. So for that, and then for the web, it adds another transpilation as well. Also, library support is poor. Like there's not as many libraries that support WASM as there are for your JavaScript. You don't have your Reacts and your Nexts and your Views and those things. Those are all JavaScript. And so not that U isn't amazing. U is amazing, but there is not the amount of options. There's not the amount of things. So it loses in the front end and in the back end, in my opinion, because of those things. Now, the one true argument that I've ever seen is basically like a plugin architecture. If you want people to be able to run their own code in your thing, WASM is cool because it allows you to support not just Lua, but anything that compiles to WASM. So embedding it in other applications to extend your application to other people's unknown code, that for like plugins, that is amazing. And I think that that's where it could truly shine if people focused on that. But people aren't focusing on that, in my opinion. All right, let's move on to the cloud. Nobody wants to hear my takes on why people aren't leveraging WASM. All right, cloud. Just months ago, Cloudflare had a major power outage that locked them out of their data center, and their code orange, I thought it was called code red, but I guess it's code orange, got tested. So basically, they had another power outage. So the first one was in November that took their PDX-1 data center completely offline, and then they had massive outages. And basically, they got to put it to the test. So on March 26th, the PDX-01 experienced another total loss of power to Cloudflare's physical infrastructure following a reported simultaneous failure of 4 owned and operated switchboards serving all of Cloudflare cages. So now, instead of the power supplies getting, the last one was basically their backup power not playing well with their backup power sources. So this data center has two independent power sources plus full set of backup power generators, and basically everything failed. This time this is the data center, the Flexinental is the data center. Switchboards serving Cloudflare's cages failed this time. This meant both primary and redundant power paths were deactivated across the entire environment. And Anyways, this means that PDX-01 went down again just 4 months after the first event. Now, this being said, they tested all of their Code Red stuff. I'm pretty sure it was called Code Red. Maybe they implemented it in Code Orange. I didn't follow it all. That being said, none of their services went down this time, which is a pretty amazing thing that they basically got to prove that what they implemented would actually work. So awesome. Good job. Interesting. MetaLlama 3 available on Cloudflare Workers AI. I brought this out specifically because this was another way I thought about running our AI. Maybe we can run it some way on a worker where only when it's actually being used are we getting charged. I don't know how expensive that will be. This is something I want to test out. It looks really easy to leverage. Basically, like this is the worker and you can make a REST request to it. So this looks like an interesting way of doing it, especially if you can spin this all the way down to 0 so it's not costing you when it's not being used. I don't know the spin up time on these types of things. So there's a whole bunch of open questions on this and how much it costs to run one query. I don't know, but I'm interested. It's interesting. Amazon renamed Amazon Code Whisper, which was such a fun name because we got to whisper every single time when we talked about it, to Amazon Q Developer. Now, last time we tested Amazon Q was a pile of dog garbage. It was absolutely useless, and it was absolutely the only thing that it could respond with was, I'm sorry, Dave, I can't respond to that. That's literally all it could do, was tell you that it couldn't do it. It was pretty bad, but we're going to have to give Q Developer a chance at the AI games because Code Whisper was our most improved in the winter games. The winter games listed the Q Developer as the most improved. And so, yeah, or Code Whisperer at the time as the most improved. So we'll see if Amazon Q Developer has made more improvements. Amazon Q Aeon. That's what. Thank you, Russell. Thank you, Russell. Professional newscast here. Only the most cutting. There's a conspiracy here. There's a conspiracy here. All right. So yeah, this is just the announcement on Amazon Code Whisper. This is really the only news coming out of Amazon this week. All right. Big news from Google Cloud. Now, if you've been using their LLMs, their AI Studio, supposedly it's gotten a lot, and their search has supposedly become a lot better. They didn't really list specifics, and I don't leverage it myself, so I can't comment on it. But supposedly, as of last week, all of these things have gotten better, with better abilities to fine-tune the models, more flexible translations in their generative AI. So if you're leveraging these things in your AI Studio, supposedly they've all gotten better in the last week. So if that's you can go ahead and give them a try and let us know if they have gotten better. Other than that, the only big news coming out of Google Cloud was the AlloyDB Kubernetes operator has reached GA as 1.0 now. So if you're wanting to run AlloyDB Omni Kubernetes operator in some other place than GCP, you can now do it if you're running Kubernetes. So that was really the really big thing. This is kind of old news. They've been working on this. The PubSub ingest data from where basically PubSub can now ingest data from more topics across GCP, which is a cool thing where you can flow your data from PubSub into a bunch of different places. And now they even support Amazon Kinesis data streams. So it's cool, but they've been expanding on this. Not like super big news as as they keep expanding where. So yeah. All right. So if you're running on Azure, this seemed like a big deal. Save up to 47%. Up to always means that this is the best possible thing if you're using the right instances. There are Azure saving plans. So if you guys are running a lot of spend on your Azure Spring apps, there are these. I'm assuming that there's some sort of committed spend that goes with this. But if you're doing this, this is a way to save quite a bit of money on this. If you're able to get one of these saving plans, most of the clouds have them in some way. There's usually a committed spend or buy over a couple of years. So if you're not doing this, you should check it out. I also need to learn Azure better. I've been saying this, but I haven't been doing it. Generally available is Azure API Center. So we've talked about the coming out of Azure API Center, and this is allowing you to have a big, massive overview of your API sprawl. API sprawl is something companies have been struggling with, especially as they add more microservices like AIs and things like that. And it can be really hard to see a big picture of it. So something like API management is really cool, especially if you have multiple teams. Kubernetes has ways to do this as well and things like that, but not all of your things necessarily sit in Kubernetes. So I haven't used it, but it is now generally available. So I know we've talked about it. I just thought I would let you guys know it's generally available. Did anybody else see anything else related to clouds that I missed for the last 2 weeks? Azure is by far my weakest cloud. I'm like okay on both Azure and GCP, or AWS and GCP. It's weird. It's weird because my knowledge in the clouds is like hyper specific. So I know portions of each cloud really well, of AWS and GCP. And then there's like portions of those clouds that I'm also like really not as good at. Dutch, we moved the tech news to Fridays at high noon. It's my lunchtime, and I decided I'd give up lunch to do news today instead of Sunday, because what I really needed was a day off. I literally had no days off. I worked, I work a very much full-time job, and then on Saturdays I would stream, and then Sundays I would stream the news, and I literally had no days off. So this is my way of having a day off. Sundays are mine. So yeah. Hopefully it works for people. I do it at 12 noon. That works for most of Europe and Africa, as well as the West Coast. It's not great for my India and Southeast Asia, or Asia in general, not just Southeast Asia. Asia in general is not great for them. My apologies. Absolutely, Dutch. Absolutely. It's good to see you too. But we're also almost done with the news. We just have the general, and the general just has like 3 things of topic. We actually did really good with our time. I can take up to an hour and a half for lunch. So yeah, we did good. We did good. There's a couple interesting things that came out. So I use Authy. It's a great authenticator app, but Bitwarden did launch its new authenticator app. So if you haven't been using one, it's available for iOS and Android. If you're not doing two-factor authentication, you need to be doing it at least on your phone. There's also hardware. UB doesn't sponsor this in any way, but the YubiKeys are out there and they do a fantastic job. So at this point, there is literally no reason not to be doing some sort of two-factor authentication. If we need a YouTube video on it helping people, I feel so strongly about this. And I think there's a lot of people that don't do it. My Mrs. Null is not a tech person, and she can do two-factor authentication. If she can do two-factor authentication, and look, Bluetooth doesn't work for her ever, like seriously ever. If she can do two-factor authentication, everybody can do two-factor authentication. Biometrics as two-factor authentication is dog poop. Biometrics, never use biometrics as two-factor authentication. Two-factor authentication over Bluetooth. Okay, Mrs. Null would not be able to do two-factor authentication over Bluetooth. That's crossing a line. I don't know what it is. So like our car can play the music over the Bluetooth, okay, with your phone. She can't use it. I get in the car and I tap her phone and it just works. Whenever she does it, it doesn't work. I don't know what it is. Anyways, it's pretty rough. Her and Bluetooth, but let me tell you why biometrics as two-factor authentication is dog water. Biometrics are not protected at all. So, why is a PIN better on your phone? Well, because your PIN is protected, especially in the United States. I don't know your country, but your fingerprint is not protected. Your fingerprint is not protected. Your fingerprint is also very easy to steal, whereas a PIN that you keep in your mind, as long as you're not loose-lipped, is very difficult to steal. So biometrics, in my opinion, is not something people should use for security purposes. Not something, it can be stolen fairly easily, and it's not protected. So, you know, I increasingly do more with security, and I also always say I'm not a security professional, although I have names on security documentation and stuff at this point, so I'm doing more and more of it. I guess I just tend to wear a tinfoil hat when thinking about these things. You have new names on patents that mean nothing. Touche, Dutch. Touche. Touche. Anyways, that's my take on biometrics for that. But anyways, I like Bitwarden for their password manager. Their password manager does have an authenticator app built into it if you pay for the premium service, which is really convenient. Now, that being said, I was already on Authy before I used Bitwarden, and thus I even though I pay for the premium, I still use Authy, which is just a fine thing. But this free app is pretty fantastic, and it's just encouraging people to leverage two-factor authentication. Oh, that's super cool. Sorry, Dutch, I don't read patents, because if you are known to read patents, you can get sued for patent. Anyways, it's a whole thing. All right, Google pulls RISC-V support from generic Android kernel. This was kind of a blow to me, but then I read Google's take more on it, and Google's take was that at this point, it's changing so rapidly, keeping up with it in the Google's kernel or in the kernel itself was more work than it was worth, especially since it wasn't actually being leveraged. And at this point, every provider of a piece of firmware was releasing their own kernel patch. And so basically Google's standpoint was, until there is better or more standard streamlined support for RISC-V, they basically weren't going to keep, code turning for something that wasn't being fully leveraged anyways. Because a lot of the times, if you got like a RISC-V thing, you got your kernel from the people that made that piece of hardware anyhow. So this generic support wasn't in the GKI wasn't that useful anyhow. So I don't know. This is, again, this kind of goes back to what Google did to Flutter and Python. I don't know the effect that this will have going forward. But we will be watching it. We will be watching it. I know that RISC-V is gaining traction in other places and even the data center, so we'll keep watching it. Hopefully not killed by Google. That seems to be a very long list at this point. And the very last thing, League of Legends implodes as Riot defends its PC bricking anti-cheat. Now, I dug into this because I was like, does their anti-cheat actually brick your machine? And every account that I found of somebody complaining that it bricked their machine probably could not have been their anti-cheat. Probably could not have actually accessed that, because even kernel level doesn't have the ability to access the boot. Like, it would have to be like getting into the bootloader, which it doesn't actually have access to. The only way those could actually be true is if it was literally a virus and getting into the into the boot, which I think is very unlikely. I think that it's very unlikely. Not to defend League of Legends or kernel level anti-cheat, but yes. You had to changing boot options does not mean that if the anti-cheat had access to your boot, then you wouldn't have to change boot options, right? Because it could just do it for you. This is why I say, like, and Windows does not hand this permission out. Like I said, they'd have to be a virus. But right, that's what I'm saying. Like, if the anti-cheat could do it for you, if it had that access, but Windows does not hand that access out. They'd have to be doing something they're not supposed to, which I guess is what people are claiming. I don't know. I don't know. Now, that being said, my big problem with this, and I will defend this, we have gotten really good statistical analysis. Our statistical analysis is so good, you can predict the response to a random question. That's how good our statistical analysis is. What this means to me is, do you know what would be a better anti-cheat? Is to run really advanced statistical analysis, some people call it AI, to observe the person playing. I think that this, do you know how people actually catch or verify cheating flagged by the anti-cheat? Is by actually watching them play. And if you can tell me that a human, by watching somebody play, can tell from their point of view, can tell that they're cheating, then statistical analysis can do it amazingly well. And you don't need kernel level access. I think we are in a time where we have a solution that is just better than kernel level anti-cheat can be. Because kernel level anti-cheat is playing a cat and mouse game. You know, a hacker will do something new, and then the kernel level anti-cheat will be trained to do that. Whereas a statistical analysis will catch new because it's just looking at player behavior. So not only do I think that kernel level anti-cheat is just the wrong way to do it, I think there's actually better. Like, you can actually achieve better. There's my 2 cents. Okay. That was it. Did anybody else see anything in the news the last 2 weeks? I've been super busy, so if I missed something in the news, I'm sincerely sorry. I don't know why this entire week I've been tired. I'm starting to feel a little bit better. But yeah, that was an advanced statistical analysis machine is really the only option, or really the only thing to catch new exploits and such. Absolutely. This is why I actually really like what's the company's name? There is a security company. Basically their whole platform is like to look for statistical anomalies on your network. I really like that type of technology because what it's saying is, hey, we're just going to look for weird things happening that don't usually happen. You basically give it a clean environment of your environment for like 2 weeks, and this is like the normal. And then anything outside of normal, it gets flagged. And that is fantastic. This is also why I think that we're burning a ton of money. And this is just my personal opinion. I could be wrong. Although I did call HashiCorp being sold, I called it. So maybe my opinion holds more water than nothing. But I think we're wasting a lot of money getting AIs to do things that are classically, we're trying to get them to replicate humans when they could do so much more than what humans could do. And I wish we were focusing more on that from the security standpoint, from the anti-cheating standpoint, I think there's so much more that AIs could be doing that they would actually be better at than replicating fuzzy humans. Humans are fuzzy, and like we're trying to make computers fuzzy, but that's not their strong suit. Let's actually play into the computer's strong suit and take these super advanced statistical analysis machines and put them to use. But that's again my. The problem is that if you start introducing regular randomness, it becomes regular. Absolutely. That's what they look for, is the regular randomness. I have created one game cheat. It was just for an experimentation. I never used it or published it. And that was all it was to see if I could be a random that they couldn't detect. It was pretty fun. I would disagree with that, Apollo. They don't. They're looking for patterns in memory. They're looking for patterns in memory while you play the game specifically, if they're doing their job correctly, and they're looking at your network. Because what happens a lot of the times with these is your game has to be fully synchronized. So I'll take Age of Empires for an example because it's an easy one. The full game has to be synchronized. That means the locations of all the units, all the things, have to be synchronized on both computers that are playing versus each other. And what happens is it's just the computer. So there's two ways to do this. You can either look at the network and see what is getting synchronized, or you can look at the memory. Either one is fine. And you can tell, and you can reveal the whole map from that, either by looking at the memory in the game or by looking at the network incoming. And you can do things based off this. This is where headshots come in, is they'll be looking at network, and by the network, they'll be able to snap to a place and shoot somebody through a wall. And it doesn't look like a human's doing it because it literally just snaps there and shoots. This is where the statistical analysis comes in. You don't really need to see that they're doing those things. Why they're looking at memory, anyways, yeah. You have very little trust in AI anti-cheat? I don't know, Dutch. I don't know, Dutch. I have very little faith in anti-cheat. Has anti-cheat really stopped the cheating problem? Name me a game right now that doesn't have a cheating problem. Also, Dutch, how many times do you shoot at the wall and not hit something? This is where the statistical analysis comes in. Happening once, absolutely. Happening every time, not so much. Right. This is why the statistical analysis will be king of flagging those things. It's easy statistics. And those statistics would change depending on what your ranking is. Absolutely. The higher ranking, the more likely something like that's going to happen, probably. And that's fine. That's one of the statistics. The analysis happens continuously, right? Anti-cheat would be happening. Anti-cheat needs to happen live. I both agree and disagree. If you're able to permanently ban somebody, it sucks that they were in the game, but it also sucks just removing them straight from the game, right? If you just remove the person, now the other team is down a person, right? That sucks. That doesn't make a fair game. You could just kill the whole game as soon as you notice it. But again, what if you're halfway through? That also sucks. Do you just let the game continue? I don't know. I don't know the right answer. Cheaters are the worst. Anyways, I got to get back to work. Thanks everybody for joining. I like that idea, Russell. Just give them a cheat score and put them into a cheat pool with more adverts, make more money off of them. If somebody starts flying, kick them, ask questions later. Absolutely. With any banning system, automated banning system, you need a way to appeal it. And I actually don't agree or disagree with Russell in making cheating pools where people that are more likely to have cheated get placed with people that are more likely to have cheated. And yeah. No, Apollo, I like doing the news live because I could sit here and record all of it. And, sometimes I do ignore chat as we're going, especially if I have only a certain amount of time. But I like doing it live because it gets input from you guys. It gets news articles from you guys. Sometimes you guys bring some of the news articles that I miss. One of the times it was great. Nexus Null brought in a vulnerability in GCP that I had missed. So those types of things are amazing because it allows us to cover a broader range of news and make sure that it stays relevant. It also gets to have a little bit of a conversation. Instead, I could have just done 30 minutes. This happened, this happened, this happened. I don't think people would have find that as much fun. Offenders of dodging, cheating. Okay, so I have one statement, then I'm going to go. Dodging is a hard problem. And the reason I say that, dodging is a hard problem. And the reason I say that is right now, Age of Empires 4 has a massive problem. The massive problem is the very high level is Conqueror. And before Conqueror, there is Diamond. And before Diamond, there is Platinum. And before Platinum, there is Gold. Now, I'm probably like a Diamond player. That's probably my level of ability. But when I was first placed as Gold. My first game as Gold was against a Conqueror 3, the highest level of the highest. If I have to beat Conquerors to get to my Diamond, it doesn't make any sense. So before you can ban Dodgers, you have to make sure that your matchmaking is acceptable. If your matchmaking isn't acceptable, then you're encouraging dodging because you have terribly unfair. This is specific to Age of Empires 4. A lot of other games do it much better. The worst part about Age of Empires is you'll lose the same number of points losing to the Conqueror that you would to losing to another Gold player. It's maybe one of the worst, most dented matchmaking. But as soon as you have good matchmaking, absolutely, Dodgers are the worst. Anyways, have a fantastic weekend. I hope to see you all tomorrow as we do some fun stuff and then do our Rust and Kubernetes stuff. I might stream tonight. We'll see. It will be later. Have yourselves a fantastic weekend.